Today, I'd like to tell you a story of an alchemist. Now, unlike the alchemist in fairy tales, whose magic is so coveted that they hide in shadowy places, this alchemist lives in plain sight. Ordinary, unassuming, often dismissed. Though they have the ability to transform basic elements into gold, no one seems to be aware of their magic. Now, what if I told you there are billions of alchemists among us? In fact, there might even be hundreds in this very room. Mothers, through cycles of conception, creation, and care, these alchemists literally regenerate society. They create human life, help babies grow, and produce breast milk, often called liquid gold, for how it fuels a baby's immune system and brain development. Now, we all know an alchemist. It might be your mother, your partner, your sister, or it could even be you. Yet we often associate a mother's identity based on what they do for other people. We might say working mom or housewife. In Kenya, we even name them after their kids. Mama Thomas, Mama Anthony, as if they don't even have an identity of their own. But have we really stopped to think about their role in society? Mothers are the backbone of their communities. Not only do they have incredible reproductive capacity, they also raise and nourish the next generation and drive economic progress. Yet their reproductive power is so often overlooked. My name is Sahar Jamal, and I'm here today because I believe that elevating the incredible alchemy of motherhood is the key to our thriving future. As a female entrepreneur and a woman in the corporate world, I have experienced firsthand how women are held back meaningfully and consistently by the patriarchy in our workplaces and our society. As someone who coaches and invests in women, I have witnessed how their immense creativity, empathy, and resilience is so often stifled by their environments. And as the leader of a maternal health organization here in Kenya, I have interacted with thousands of mothers, and I am convinced that they unequivocally hold the key to the future of this country in their hands. These experiences have ingrained in me that our reproductive capacity is so often overlooked. In our current society, a woman's physiology is treated as an inconvenient necessity at best, something to manage, tolerate, work around. From the moment a girl gets her first period to the day a woman enters menopause, she is trained to bleed shamefully, breastfeed discreetly, and age invisibly, concealing the cycles that reproduce humanity as if there's something to be ashamed of. I might even argue that our reproductive capacity is sometimes penalized. Every 2 minutes, a mother dies for preventable reasons related to pregnancy and childbirth. And even after a child is born, women carry out 76% of unpaid care work, valued at over $10 trillion every single year. Now, these are just some examples of how women pay a personal penalty for a public service. Our society is treating our reproductive power as if it's our liability, when in reality, it's one of our greatest assets. I want to acknowledge and make it known that this is true and relevant for all women, whether or not we have children, whether we are cis or trans. Our cyclical generative physiology releases hormones throughout our life cycle that unleash our power and our alchemy. Did you know that during the follicular phase of our menstrual cycle, there's a rise in estrogen that drives creativity, energy, and confidence? This is perfect for problem-solving, innovation, and leadership. Then, during motherhood, our breast milk is a living, intelligent fluid that magically adapts based on the baby's age, the time of day, and even the presence of illness. We are literally delivering precision nutrition and medicine with our bodies. Finally, human females are one of the few species to experience menopause, just like elephants. And far from signaling our decline, this actually primes women to become natural leaders of society. Scientists call this the grandmother effect. And for those of you who have been in safari here in Kenya, you'll know that the elephant queendom is actually a thriving matriarchy. Now, I want to focus on the motherhood and breastfeeding part of this journey to illustrate my point. 6 years ago, I met a new mother and a construction site worker named Isabel. She had just had a child, and she was dreading her return to work because to her, it meant giving up on breastfeeding. Now, unsurprisingly, her construction sites did not provide maternity leave or a lactation room. And she didn't have access to refrigeration and electricity to pump and store her breast milk. Plus, she could not afford baby formula on her modest salary. And in her male-dominated workplace, she was often chastised for taking breastfeeding breaks, and some of her male colleagues even made jokes about her breasts. Like Isabel, the vast majority of the 1 million mothers who give birth in Kenya every single year have to choose between staying at home to breastfeed their babies and returning to work to support their families financially. When a Kenyan mom stays home for caregiving reasons, she often sacrifices months of earnings in the short term. And in the long term, after several pregnancies, she might give up years of income and sometimes even drop out of the workforce completely. When a Kenyan mom needs to return to work to support her family financially, she'll often struggle to breastfeed. In fact, in low-resource settings like Nairobi's informal settlements, a study was conducted that proved that only 2% of mothers were able to breastfeed as recommended. Now, unfortunately, this makes babies prone to serious illnesses like stunting, pneumonia, and diarrhea, making them 14 times more likely to die prematurely. Hearing stories like this inspired me to start Maziwa, to ignite the potential of working African mothers and help them feel celebrated for their reproductive power. Our discreet, portable breast pumps have helped thousands of women breastfeed in all kinds of workplaces. In fact, Isabel was actually able to pump while painting a house using our early prototype. Now, I don't tell this story to show off, but to pose the question, why wasn't a simple product like this introduced earlier? In 2021, we were the first wearable breast pump in Kenya. And even in the global north, these products were not invented until the last decade. This is not rocket science, but it's just another example of how women like Isabel are so often overlooked. Now, after several years and reaching over 25,000 women, we have learned that when you support breastfeeding mothers, they can recognize their own power, provide for their families, nourish their babies, and transform our future. Because mothers like Isabel are the key to our future. According to the World Bank, women are more likely to reinvest their income into their families and communities than men. And driving gender equality in the labor force could actually drive an additional 28 trillion in GDP. That's a 25% increase in global GDP. On the other hand, women are also responsible for the well-being of our future generations. And ensuring mothers can breastfeed adequately could actually save 820,000 lives every single year. Now, if these stories and statistics were not enough to convince you, just a few months ago, I lost my own mother to a reproductive cancer that she faced after experiencing menopause. My beautiful mom died at the young age of 66. She passed away from a stage 1 cancer in just 21 months because women's reproductive health has never been given the priority, investment, and protection it deserves. In fact, many clinical trials for cancer were not even required to include women until 1993. This is the ultimate consequence of undervaluing women's health. When we fail to protect and invest in the very system that creates and sustains life, we not only penalize women, but we weaken the foundation of our society. So I ask you all, how long will we wait to invest in women's health and the kinds of treatments that could have saved the life of my mom and thousands of other women? How can we justify asking mothers to bear the risks and burdens of their motherhood in silence? And how long will we penalize mothers for their reproductive capacity when it's the very reason each one of us is here today? Despite decades of advocating better policies and supportive systems, it still feels like these efforts are being treated as inconveniences and not investments. Why? Because the mindsets and motivations underlying them have not changed. In fact, protective policies that are in place are not even being practiced. For example, in Kenya, the Health Act of 2017 actually requires companies to provide a fully equipped lactation room if they have more than 30 employees. Many of you work in these workplaces. How many of you actually have seen this in practice? More recently, some of these protections are even being reversed and removed. In Kenya, we almost reintroduced tax on menstrual products after protecting them for over 20 years. And in the US, the Supreme Court overturned federal protections for reproductive rights that have been in place for 50 years. So what can we do to drive the meaningful change that we really need to see? First, we can advocate to our institutions. Can you ask your company how they're supporting new mothers? And explain to them why it's actually good for their business to do so. Or will you elect a government representative that has a clear plan for maternal employment support because of all the benefits you now know it has for our society? We can also drive support as individuals. Will you lend a hand to a pregnant or breastfeeding mom in your life? Or will you teach your daughter or niece something you learned here today about her reproductive power? And don't forget to talk to the boys too. Finally, we can create a narrative shift. This is not just about maternal employment support, but about taking a shared sense of responsibility for the future generations of our children. This is not just about accommodating menstruation, motherhood, and menopause, but about recognizing that women are natural leaders because of our reproductive power, not in spite of it. So will you start to recognize the mothers in your life, not just as Mama Joseph or stay-at-home mom, but as the alchemist who holds our collective future? Let's move from a society that only values productive economic labor to one that also values reproductive generative labor. Let's move from independently bearing the burden of raising our future generations to interdependently taking a village to raise a child. So whether it's your mother or your partner or Isabel, every mother is an alchemist, turning love into life and labor into legacy. She holds the key to the future, not just for her own child, but for every one of us. Thank you.